There are many legendary commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, so many that it's really difficult to decide which are the best pairings to make your open field marches with. So today, I'll go over the best open field murder ball, starting at just one march for people who are new to Season of Conquest, and working my way all the way up to 7 marches for players who might have older accounts or might be whales in the game. So if you want to know the current best 7 march murder ball, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now, quick thing before we get into the ball, I am a little bit sick, so I have a bit of a sore throat, which means the video might cut around a bit more, and also you might be able to hear in my voice, I have a bit of a blocked nose as well. So if it sounds weird, it's just because I'm a little bit under the weather. But other than that, we'll just start off by going over our first march, and it's really going to be our first 3, because when it comes to choosing one of your first 3 marches, you're just going to have to pick whichever troop type you want to use first. Usually what I recommend when it comes to making a murder ball is using a mixture of commanders. You shouldn't really go all in on one troop type like I personally do and a few other more niche accounts would. You should have 1 infantry, 1 archer, 1 cavalry at the bare minimum in every single murder ball. But when it comes to making 1 march, you want to kind of pick the best out of that ball. So let's start off. If you were to pick a cavalry commander or a cavalry march, it's pretty simple, just Nevsky Joan. I mean, it's just going to be a really good march. Nevsky's got the high single target. He's got a defense reduction, which isn't too OP if you're doing just 1 march. I recommend Nevsky more for the 3rd march, but if you wanted a cav march first, you can get away with Nevsky. The thing he lacks is the fact that if you are using him only on 1 march, you're not going to get that full effect from the defense reduction since you'll only have 1 march to do it, and it'll be a 15% instead of a 45% reduction. So cavs, I don't recommend being the first commanders of choice, but if you were a cav main, you can still do it. It worked fine. So Nevsky's got a decent debuff. He's got really, really good stats. And Joan is just one of the best AoE commanders in the game. So they go together very well, and you'll definitely get good trades running this march as your one and only cav march. It'll work well, you can micro it very, very well, which means you'll get amazing trades, and it's just going to be a powerful open field force that you can take on through some of the later marches that I'll mention. If you were to pick just 1 infantry march, there's really 2 options here depending on if you're newer to Season of Conquest or not. If you're not new to Season of Conquest, then you can just go Liuche with an Alex. I mean, that would work perfectly fine. It will trade well. It will get decent damage. It's got good stats. It's fairly tanky and fairly fast. And you'll be okay with that march. If you're new to Season of Conquest, you don't have Alex, and you don't have Liuche yet, I'd go William Liuche. It's slightly better. It's like 5 to 10% better. So if you want that slight increase, it makes more sense to get William. Purely because, yes, Alex is still a good commander with Liuche, but William is that slight bit better, and it's obviously worth getting the slightly better commander than the much older, not as good commander. So Alex, if you already have him, put him with your Liuche, that would work fine. But if you don't, William with Liuche will be slightly better, it will be slightly stronger, and it's going to allow you to do a little bit better on the open field. The reason these marches are really good, Liuche's got some of the best, he's got the 2nd best 5 target AoE in the game, beat by Zuelang because Zuelang has extra AoE effects. He's got march reductions, which is nice, and then he's just got all around pretty good stats and damage. And then Alex has got instant damage. He's pretty stat tanky. He's pretty fast as well. And William is the newest infantry open field commander. High single target damage with a bit of revenge damage, and then overall pretty decent stats all throughout his kit with a bit of a good supporting shield on his expertise. So William with Liuche, easily the best infantry march for the 1 march. Or you can do Liuche with an Alex as well, and that will work. Or even a Scipio if you already have him. Then Scipio with Liuche is another option for your single infantry march. As for the archer march, my specialty, it's super simple. There's really only 1 option. There's not many substitutes to it. It's a Zuelang with a Hermann. Simple, easiest archer march to use. They're both AoE commanders. They're both really high on damage. It's not the tankiest, it's not the fastest, but the damage is so high that it's really just enough for you to outdo your opponents most of the time. Especially if this is your one and only march, you can micro it extremely well, and if you can do that, you're going to get ridiculous trades, because with archers, if you don't get hit, you just get the best trades in the game. So with 1 march, it's really easy to get out of tough situations and preempt when a march is going to end up in a bad spot, and that is why Zuelang with Hermann can trade ridiculously well with that 1 march. Not to mention, it's not really tethered to anything. That's the thing with the infantry and archer marches where it beats the cavs. They don't really need extra marches to be trading well. You can trade perfectly fine with just Zuelang and Hermann, or just a William with Liuche, but with Nevsky, you kind of want the other marches there. It's not essential for Nevsky, but it makes sense, and Joan's boosting marches as well, so again, it also makes sense for you to have Nevsky Jones towards the end of your 3 marches. That being said, in my opinion, the best order to go in if you weren't too fussed by which troop type you do first. Funny enough, I still think archers would be the best first one just because the amount of micro you could get out of the Zulang with the Hermann, which will just get you really, really good trades overall. Not to mention Hermann's got a really good debuff that is going to apply to Hermann himself, and you don't need any other troops or commanders to be with you. It's just an overall good debuff, and he's just an overall strong commander. So I think archers are obviously, well not obviously, but in my opinion, the best first pick. No bias there, just like literally I would recommend it as a first pick for a Season of Conquest March. Then for the second one, I just go with the infantry. William Wheelchair, really, really strong march. It's going to trade extremely well. And then the third one, I just go with the cavalry, of course, because, well, you want one of each troop type. Nevsky Jones is really good once you have 3 marches, and it would trade very well. That being said, though, you could do those first 3 marches in any order, and you would pretty much be just as safe. So you could do archers last, you could do cav first, you can do infantry last, and cavs first, whatever it is. It can still work, it'll still trade well, and it's not too big of a game breaker. Now, moving on to our 4th, 5th, and 6th marches. This is more for medium spenders, low spenders, really hardcore game grinding people who play the game a lot more. This is where you're going to look at 4, 5, and 6 marches, and these, they are very similar. We're going to look at 1 cav, 1 infantry, 1 archer march, but there's definitely a more set order here. And to begin with, for your 4th march, honestly, again, I do recommend picking up either archers, or you could pick up infantry. That is the recommended, in my opinion, for the 4th march. If you were to pick up archers, I would go with a Boudica Prime and then a Shurbanipal secondary. Boudica's got really good single target damage. She makes the opponent take a lot more skill damage, which is very nice, and it's going to allow you to stack that up with your Hermann Prime as well. And then she's also just going to have decent all-round stats. She's not very tanky, she is a bit outdated, but that being said, she's still a very decent commander and can trade well, and with a Shurbanipal, there's a lot of synergy. A Shurbanipal can technically have the highest single target archer damage in the game, and then he's really stat heavy from his expertise, and he can also be a bit tanky and a bit fast himself. So a Shurbanipal with Boudica, or Boudica as the primary, is a very solid archer march. It's very good for 4 overall marches, and it's probably the 2nd strongest archer march in the game. So Boudica Shurbanipal, I highly recommend it, and it is definitely going to trade pretty well. The other option you have is with infantry, and you can go with something like a Scipio Aemilianus and a Gorgo, or you can go with a Guan and a Scipio. Personally, I recommend Guan Scipio because Gorgo with the other Scipio Aemilianus is a little bit different. It's not as OP, but it can definitely trade well, but it's only got single target damage, which is a bit of a problem, whereas Guan Scipio doesn't only have single target damage, so that is still a very solid march to be running Guan Scipio. It's not the most OP nowadays, it's very outdated, but if you're looking for the AoE and the double damage, more than you were looking for something like a more sustainable march like Boudica and a Shurbanipal, and you already have Guan and Scipio, you could run them for your 4th march, and I would see it as totally reasonable. The reason is Guan's got silence, he's got AoE, Scipio also has AoE, very stat heavy, similar to William where he has that free shielding factor that he is going to give your troops, so he is definitely a pretty good commander with Guan Yu, and they're going to trade decently. But if you didn't want that, you can go with Scipio. They're both smite commanders, there's a lot of smite synergy there. Scipio Aemilianus himself, I think he does have a silence. I forget though if he needs to be in a rally. He doesn't need to be rally, he just needs to be a primary, so I'd run him as the primary. So Scipio Aemilianus with Gorgo is also an option, or Scipio Africanus with Guan, or Guan and then Scipio Africanus secondary is also another really good option. Moving on to your 5th march, you're not just going to pick whichever march you didn't pick. So let's say you picked infantry. For your 5th march, I wouldn't go and get the archer march. I'd actually go and get the cavalry march. The reason is, you're going to pick up a very special commander known as Belisarius Prime, probably a commander that is known to be the biggest flop of the year. However, when you get to 5 marches, he's really good. That's purely because when you get to 5 marches, Belisarius' expertise is like giving yourself instantly 12% more all damage on all of your marches. It's an instant debuff as long as you have 5 or more troops hitting a target, and once you have 5 marches, you're guaranteed to have 5 troops hitting a target. So as you get more marches, Belisarius progressively gets better, which is why once you hit 5 marches, he's at his max potential, and that's why I would get him over whichever march you didn't get before. But for 4 marches, he's not as strong, because you only get 9% more damage. That being said, Belisarius Prime, he's not the most tanky, he's not the most damage dealing, he's got good stats overall, like they're not horrible, but they're not amazing. It's really that expertise which brings him to another very good level. He also does have a silence in a way where he reduces the opponent's rage and increases their rage requirement, which is again a very nice thing to have on a commander. So it's around a 3-second silence at the absolute maximum, and he's going to do pretty good in most open field situations. So Belisarius, when you're at 5 marches, he's good, and then you put him with Hao Bing, very fast rage cycle, allows you to get that silence off a little bit more often, and also just high overall single target damage with good fast damaging stats. So overall, when we look at someone like Hao Bing, he's good, he's not bad by any means, and he works very well with Belisarius Prime. You can also do William, but then again, it's not as good as Belisarius Prime when you're looking at 5 marches, because Belly Prime's debuffs at 5 marches outweigh William's buffs, in my personal opinion. So Belisarius for 5 marches, pretty much an uncrowned king in terms of debuff there, and he's going to work really well with a Hao Bing. So for 5 marches, you definitely want to pick up that Belisarius with the Hao Bing March. Just as a quick recap before we move on, the 5 March murder ball is currently sitting at, for infantry, you're looking at having a William Wallace with your Liu Chair, and then you might have a Guan with a Scipio, or you might have a Scipio Aemilianus with a Gorgo. You also, for your archers, will have a Zulang with a Hermann Prime, and then you might have a Boudica and a Shirvanipal if you chose to get them over the infantry march. And then for your next 2 cav marches, you'll have a Alexander Nevsky with a Joan Prime, and you will have a Hao Bing with a Belisarius. It's a very solid 5 march ball. This is probably the most common thing you'll see between most players. People don't usually go above 5 marches just because you need Crystal Tech to access 6 and 7 marches. So this is probably the most common 5 march ball. You'll either have 2 infantry, 2 archers, and 1 cavalry, or you'll have 2 calves, which is what I recommend, 2 infantry and 1 archer, or 2 calves, 2 archers, 1 infantry. Something along those lines is certainly what I would recommend for the open field, and it is what you would pretty much expect. Moving on to the 6th march, it's really simple here. I'm not going to go over it too much. You just pick whichever march you didn't pick before. So if you picked infantry before, pick with the Boudica and a Shirvanipal. That'll be a very good 6th march. And if you picked a archer commander before, so if you picked Boudica and a Shirvanipal, I would just go with a Scipio Africanus and a Guan, or I would go with a Scipio Aemilianus and a Gorgo. So any of those will be your 6th march, and that's going to be a good solid 6 march murder ball with pretty much only meta commanders. Moving on to 7 marches. This is where we're going to go a bit out of the box. Usually I'd recommend getting something like maybe a Trajan, getting something a little bit different. And today we're still going to go with different, but I'm going to recommend a ranged march. It's going to be a Margaret with a Gonzalo. Pretty sure this is the best ranged march in the game. I would do a double check on that if you don't, or I'm not 100% sure. So regardless, if you're looking to get a ranged march, please go double check that. I think Mr. Siege definitely has a video on what the best ranged march is. But to my knowledge, it is Margaret and Gonzalo. For a 7th march, it's really, really good. You're going to have good range damage. You can sit in the back. You don't really have to manage it that much. It's going to just be able to grind kills. And if you don't get this march killed, it can trade really well. Keep in mind, you do want to still keep an eye on it, because if an enemy is able to sneak up on you, you can get hammered really quickly. So Gonzalo with Margaret, it's a really solid range march. Of course, ranged commanders are a bit scary to invest in. They're a bit expensive, but it seems like they're here to stay. They're not going nowhere. So it's a good idea to pick one of these up for your 7th march. And in my opinion, nowadays, it beats out getting something like a Trajan Mulan, just because that march is a little bit too outdated. So getting a Margaret, getting her all the way up to the expertise, and getting Gonzalo and taking him up the expertise for your 7th march will do really well. And that means you've really only got meta commanders, because if you were to pick a different troop type, you have to pick some weird commanders. If you were to pick infantry, you have to get into something crazy like Sargon and Tarek. If you did archers, you'd have to get Henry and YSG. And if you did cavalry, you'd probably have to get something that has a Zhang Yu in it, which is definitely no longer near the meta. So when it comes to picking up that 7th march, really you want to get something from a different field of commanders. And I find that the ranged commanders and the engineering ones will be the best choice there. So Margaret with Gonzalo, to my knowledge, the best range march, and it is a very good one for your 7th. Not to mention Gonzalo has AoE as well, which is nice, and it is also smite damage. So Gonzalo, he's a pretty good overall commander, good stats, good damage, range damage, and Margaret boosts him quite a bit, since she's going to increase your range normal damage by 50% once she throws her active skill, which will boost your smite damage on Gonzalo. So really good march. It's going to trade well, and you definitely will not regret it. Now, the last thing I would talk about are some substitute commanders you could bring in. Maybe you have some of these commanders I'll mention, but not some of them, or some of the other ones I've mentioned today. One of them is, if you've got a Boudica and you don't have an Ashurbanipal, but you have a YSG, you can use that. It'll still trade pretty decently. It is missing a bit of the tankiness, but it is still a decent commander by pretty much any means, and it will still trade decently. Or you could go Henry YSG for that 2nd march. Personally, though, I still think Boudica is better. So Boudica with YSG is another option. Another one is for the cavalry. I think I already mentioned it. William instead of Belisarius is another option, so you can definitely pick that up. If you already have William, I wouldn't go and get Belisarius, so that should be noted. So William, a good substitute to the Belisarius commander. And then also for infantry, I've of course mentioned this one. Alex can be a substitute to William Wallace. So if you already have Alex, don't need to get William Wallace. It is still perfectly fine to just run Alex. You can also run a Mehmed in place of a lot of the commanders today. So if you don't have, for example, Hermann Prime yet and you've got a Zulang, you can run Zulang Mehmed to start off while you work on getting Hermann Prime to, I want to say, at least 5511 before you start to use him. Maybe even 5551 is a little bit better, or yeah, just a little bit, or 5551 is a little bit weaker than a good leveled Mehmed. So Hermann, a good option to get leveled up as soon as possible, but if you don't have him there yet, Mehmed can work as a substitute commander with most of the commanders I've mentioned today. So if you're working on a march and it's not done yet, but you kind of want to bust it out in the open field, I would go with Mehmed as a good substitute. Caesar can also work with some commanders, so for Hao Bing, if you don't have your Belisarius yet and you really want to run the march, Caesar is slightly better than Mehmed because Caesar is really good when you get a lot of fast rage cycles. Other than that, when it comes to sticking with the best commanders, you kind of don't really want to sway off the commanders I've mentioned today, just because even though the substitutes are options, stuff like William I over Belisarius is still pretty decent. Something like running a Mehmed might not be the best idea, but if you really want to do it, you can get away with it. It just won't be nearly as strong as running the march itself. But that being said, substitutes are an option. Using commanders you already own should be your priority. I wouldn't go an Expedisa commander because it's 20 or 30% better. I would wait for something that is much stronger where it is worth the 700 gold head investment. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to ask you guys to consider joining the Discord server. It is definitely the best spot to ask me or other players for advice when it comes down to your own murder ball. Of course, a lot of things when it comes to murder ball are personalized to your account. Maybe you want to be an infantry main, maybe you want to be a cav main, whatever it is. My Discord is a really good place to get advice for your account. So if you're interested in running things on your account, looking to get better marches, looking to have the best 5 march murder ball possible and getting some outside advice, I definitely would join my Discord server. The link for this will be in the pinned comment and also in the description, and it is definitely a very nice place to be. And if you don't like it, you can always consider leaving. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.